Welcome to The Grand Balance, a bi-weekly podcast hosted by two working grandmas navigating the beautiful chaos of work and family. So Sharon, today we have a guest on a topic that we've been wanting to discuss for, I think, the last 2 years now.
We've been waiting to talk about elder care for the entirety of our podcast.
Yes. So we are so excited to have with us Kim Brant-Lucich. And Kim is a prior colleague of mine. I worked with Kim many, many years ago in healthcare. And I know, Kim, you left healthcare, at least the formal hospital environment, a couple of years ago, and you decided to go out and do some other fun things, which includes writing this book. So can you tell us a little about your journey and why you decided to write it?
Sure. It kind of goes back to a couple years ago. And I was working in healthcare again. I was working at a health system, and I was laid off along with, several colleagues, one of whom is my writing partner. And we had decided to start a business, and we were focused on the community of people over 50 who were in career transition, people who've been laid off or semi-retired, whatever it was. And as we started to meet to formulate how we were going to monetize the business, what we were going to do. We had regularly scheduled meetings, and they constantly were getting kind of waylaid because one of us would say, "Oh, I can't meet tomorrow. I've got to take my mother to a doctor's appointment." Or, I'm sorry I was late. That was my mother on the phone. Oh, she has another UTI. I mean, it was that sort of thing where we were constantly, both of us, because I was dealing with my mother and he was dealing with his mother, his father, his in-laws, a brother. So all of this caregiving. And then our meetings really became about, oh, let me send you this picture of this transport wheelchair. And we started sending each other pictures of wheelchairs and walkers. And we talked about UTIs, very common among elderly people. And there was a point where we just kind of looked at each other and said, we should write a book. I mean, we should write a book about caring for elderly parents. And so that was about 2 years ago. That was when we started down the process. We did a lot of education about how to self-publish and writing books. And we leveraged AI quite a bit to sort of identify what categories of topics we might want to include. And we did a lot of that, wrote and then edited, rewrote and rewrote and rewrote. And finally, after 2 years, we published the book. And I wish we had published a year sooner, because in the interim, quite a few books have gotten written by quite a lot of people on the topic, which tells us at least that it is a topic that people really care about. And when we were going through the process and people would say, "Hey, what are you up to?" I'd say, "Well, I'm in the process of writing a book about caring for elderly parents." And I always got the same reaction, which was, "Oh my gosh, we really need something like that. Oh my gosh, that's so important." So that's sort of the long answer.
We all find ourselves in that situation, it seems. Your book is titled Survival Guide to Caring for Aging Parents. Maintain your sanity while navigating the maze of healthcare living and financial options. I love the idea that you did this because so many of us are in the same boat, and you emphasize the importance of being prepared for the future. In my own personal case, with my mom, my sister and I thought we were super well prepared, and indeed, we
Right.
found out quickly we were not. So, is there any blanket tips you can give our audience that pretty much applies to everyone, of things you can do to maybe better prepare yourself?
That's a great question. I think that's the terrible answer, especially having just written the book, but you can never really be prepared for when that moment comes, because what happens is it starts off, and we talk about this a little bit in the book. It starts off really simply. In my case, it started off with taking my mother to doctor's appointments. And then it started off with, she was having mobility issues, and I would just do her grocery shopping for her. And then with COVID, I was doing all her grocery shopping and bringing it to the door, knock and run. So I wouldn't be in close contact, waving to her, having things sent by Instacart and all those things. But I think what happens is you start to realize that something is declining, whether it's your parents' mental health or their physical health and well-being. And once it starts, it seems to be an exponential decline. And that's the thing I think people have to be prepared for, that it isn't just, oh, mom doesn't really need help now. We can wait. It's the minute you start to think it may be coming, just start planning for it. There are a lot of things I think you have to plan ahead. The finances of it, understanding, okay, what happens when the time comes that we have to put mom or dad into an assisted living? And what resources do we have? And do they have money? Do they have long term care insurance? So just planning that. I did things like switching my mother's health insurance, which that's a whole case study in the book about
I'm
switching it and then
sure.
switching it back. But I looked at her finances. I knew she was running out of money many years before we put her in assisted living. And so I was sort of prepared for there's going to be a time when I have to really be footing the bill. So I was a little bit prepared for that. But I think what you can't prepare for is it seems like they just need a little bit of help. And next thing you know, it's you can't have a day job because your day job's now caring for your parent or whatever.
Well, and
So that's
that's why it was so important for us, as working grandparents. We're kind of in that middle, right? So we have our our grandkids helping out with, we still have our kids we're supporting, and then now we have our parents, so it's kind of like that triple caregiving role. We're
right.
constantly just caregiving and caregiving. So, based on your experience, and I'm assuming throughout this journey, you and your partner talked to many other people who were and did research and all of that. When do you know, like, is the time that you do need to step in even if they're refusing help? Like, how do you get to that point where you just kind of have to force it?
Gosh, that's such a good question. E- Every I think every situation is different. And we talked to all of our friends. We interviewed a lot of people. We have case studies throughout the book, different people's experience. But it depends a little bit on your parents' mental capabilities. I was really lucky. My mother didn't have any dementia. Alzheimer's, nothing. So she was mentally 100% the whole time. So I could have the conversation. And I do remember specifically the day I said, Mom, I think you need to move to assisted living. And of course I got that I I can't. I don't, and I had the hard conversation of saying, is it about the money? And she admitted that it was. So I could say, well, we're not going to worry about the money. I've got it. So that was the situation with me. My husband caring for his mother was much more difficult because there was resistance to everything. If you're going to try to get me to leave my house, just bury me out here on the island and that sort of thing. So I think you do have to have the hard conversation. There are things that they'll resist. I mean, I had the time my mother fell and I got the phone call from Marina Del Rey Fire Department at midnight. Your mother fell. She won't let us break down the door. And, we're hopping in the car and driving through the rain to get to her. And she refused to go to the emergency room. Mom,
Yeah.
let's make sure you don't have a concussion. And she refused to go. And so there's a point where you have to honor your parents. They absolutely don't want to do something. You have to listen. You have to let them weigh in on the decision if they're mentally competent to do that. And sometimes the sad thing is it's really, the child becomes the parent becomes the child, where you actually have to say, this is what you need and this is what we're going to do. And you have to kind of talk to them like they're a child and tell them, here's what we're doing. But
Such
the
a
most
difficult
important thing is
situation.
it's very difficult. You've got to let them weigh in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious to hear, what was your journey like looking at assisted living care? And do you have any tips on how to go about that if you find yourself in a situation where you need to move a parent or a loved one to assisted care?
I do. I'll try to do the short version. We have a whole chapter that's just on living situations.
Oh, nice.
And there's about 4 tiers of there's independent living, which is basically an apartment, but it's in a facility that has a dining room and also has assisted living. So you could move in with, I'm going to just go take my breakfast in the dining room and then I'm going to cook dinner for myself or whatever. And then when you start to need more assistance, eventually you may end up in the assisted living portion. And then as you really begin to need 24/7 care, then you transition to a nursing home. There are facilities that have all of them in one, and they commonly refer to this as aging in place. You age through the process. First, it's just like a senior community, you have activities and neighbors, and then eventually you need more help, and you start having people escort you to the dining room or toileting and bathing and things like that, and then eventually just, full on nursing care. In the perfect world, I think the least desirable situation, in this is my opinion, is any kind of a nursing home. Anything you're in a shared room, you're sharing a bathroom, they're doing everything for you. It's like just a step down unit from a hospital. It's the saddest sort of situation. So that is maybe the last stop before hospice care. So it wouldn't be my first choice to ever go looking for a nursing home for a parent. But assisted living, the huge variability in price. You're not going to find a place less than 5,000 a month. But most of them are more. They come up from there. It's usually a menu of services where first you're paying for their like room and board, and then, oh, well, we need someone to give out the meds. And so that's an extra 1,000. We need someone to escort her to the dining room. That's another 500. We need someone to help with showering and toileting, and that's another 500. And it all keeps adding
Is it
up.
like a menu
But
like
what
that?
Yeah, I have
it
several
is,
friends in Florida.
most places, it's like a menu.
Hmm.
And what I did, and I'll tell you how I found the place where my mother ended up, which just was by pure coincidence, the same place where my grandmother had been.
Oh, wow.
Um, there are agents, there are people who that is their job. They look for assisted living for your parent, and you basically say, "Hi, this is my mother's situation, my father's situation. This is what my budget is," and they will kind of send you a list of places that you're on your own to reach out to the places, then make an appointment to go take a look at it. But they're basically brokers. You don't pay them anything. They're compensated by the facilities. The industry is regulated. So it isn't like, well, I'm going to send you to Sunrise Living because they will give me a $1,500 commission versus, the Belmont, and they're only going to give me 500. It doesn't
Mhm.
work that way. I think they're not incentivized to send you to one place over another. They're a little bit agnostic, which is a good thing, which means they know the market. The woman I worked with said, "Look, I'm giving you the name of this place, but I don't think your mother's going to like it, based on what I told her." So I was lucky I had a person. And then I went and looked at the place and remembered my grandmother having been there and liking it. And then I took my mother there. My mother was, perfectly competent to go check it out herself. We went there, we had lunch, so she was able to see the dining room, see what the other people looked like in the place. So, what I'd say is any living situation, if you can involve your parent in the process and let them see it and look at it and say yes or no, you wanna do that. But if they have functionality where they can walk a few steps on their own, they can take themselves to the bathroom, maybe even prepare a meal for themselves, and you wanna go with the least amount of assistance possible, and that would be assisted living, or another option is a group home. That's usually like a residential home that has maybe 5 bedrooms and 5 residents and a couple caregivers, and they have their own room and bathroom typically, and, maybe a dresser and a bed, and they're getting more attention than they might in an assisted living. The ratio is much lower of patient to caregiver because there's only about 5, I don't wanna say patients, residents. But that's a group home is another option. They are less expensive than assisted living, but harder to find.
Do you cover in your book, those that say, no, I'm not leaving my home and I want in home care? and
We do
really
talk quite
work
a
through those
yeah.
and screen because, you know, watching out and making sure that they're being taken care of and not being abused and things like that, which I know you'd have to do it anywhere, but when there's nobody else watching, I could imagine it would be more scary.
Or taken advantage of.
Right.
No, that is such a good question because elder abuse is a huge issue.
Mhm.
And, I had a friend who was going through this looking for in-home care for her mother and, couldn't afford some of the services because if you're paying anywhere from 30 to $50 an hour, let's say for someone who's not a clinician, and, that adds up if you need someone 40 hours a week or if you need someone 24/7. But you can hire people without necessarily them coming through an agency. You can hire people at closer to, minimum wage, at least in California, $18, $20, something like that. But it sounds terrible. You get what you pay for. So you really have to interview people. I think what this friend of mine went through was, someone just suddenly they don't show up. Or they show up, but they don't really wanna do anything. They show up, they're, on their phone, they're watching social media, they're not really assisting the parent. They're like an overpriced babysitter not doing anything. So you have to interview people. You have to go through the interviews, and we talk about this in the book a little bit. If your parent's native language is something other than English, Farsi or Spanish or whatever it is, you want a caregiver who they're gonna be able to understand. With my mother was very hard of hearing. That's a lot of why I went to a doctor's appointment, so I could yell back what the doctor was saying to her, and and she had trouble with accents, and a lot of caregivers have accents. So, you have to consider that also when you're interviewing people. If someone has a really strong accent and your parent's hard of hearing, it's not gonna work because bad enough to not be able to hear what they're saying, but then to not understand the accent. So those are all things you have to consider. But I think best thing if you can afford it is work with an agency that's bonded, that carries insurance, that has vetted the caregivers. And you should be there to interview the caregiver and possibly, show up periodically when the caregiver's there and just, oh, don't mind me. I have to do some things for dad. And sort of be watching what they're doing and how they're interacting with your parent.
Yeah,
But you
great
have to
advice.
be yeah, you have to
Back
be
to the,
proactive.
assisted living, the broker you spoke about, how would someone find those people that do that type of job?
I'm not sure. I know that sounds crazy. This was a friend of a friend. I literally, was at a brunch or something at her house and she said, "Oh, this is what I do for a living." It's like, "Oh, wow."
Yeah, that's interesting because 'cause I've
You
never heard about that. My mom was in hospice and we were looking for assisted care, and the hospital gave us a list of possibilities, and we just kinda toured all of them, but I had never heard of that type of position, which is interesting because it does do a lot of the legwork.
It does. There are people, hospitals have discharge planners and sometimes they can assist. There are a whole bunch of I don't have them right in front of me right now, but there are like senior care organizations. There's a whole list of organizations that you could actually call local organizations, church, synagogue, community center, and ask around there. Just call up and go, "Hey, do you have any lists?" And they might have lists of assisted living facilities and places like that. I mean, there was one that is pretty well known called A Place for Mom. They have a website. I
Yeah,
think
I've
they're
heard of
one of
that
the
too.
agents.
We did
Yeah,
actually use that.
they're pretty pricey, most of the assisted living places. I think they're part of this organization, A Place for Mom, but they're one of the groups I talk to. So you can Google this and come up with names of things. Probably check the ARP website. It wouldn't surprise me if they didn't at least probably not point you to an individual person, but to names of some assisted living.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll luck into the fact that the person who's doing sales for the assisted living came from another place where they worked, or they will say, well, you should look at some other places and here's a broker who we use. So
Yeah.
kind of ask your friends, ask people Google it and try ARP and That's kind of the best advice
Yeah.
I
No,
give.
those are good tips for everyone to kind of have options when they need information to reach out to.
Well, and that's why I think the the book is so important because I know over the last year and a half, I was on the podcast speaking of my mother-in-law who did pass last year, but just
Oh, I'm
all the
sorry.
things my thank you, all the things my sister-in-law had to deal with, and everything was always like last minute, you know. And she was very strong-willed and she wanted to stay home, and so it was, how do you find resources? And it's a big uphill battle, to your point, and we didn't even know, like, what does Medicare cover? What does their health insurance cover? I mean, it was just so much investigation constantly.
Right.
And so having, kind of a central place would be really great to be able to say, "Okay, here's my checklist of all the things that I'm gonna have to do." When you have somebody, and I guess it'd be like 2 phases. One is they're like your mom where, she had full mental capacity and everything versus those that do not. What legal documents should every family have in place so that before there is a crisis or before something does happen, how do you know you can make those decisions? Especially like for your mom, she's full mental capacity, but does that mean she can take care of herself completely? Maybe not. So,
Right.
does it change what legal documents you have in place versus those that aren't at full mental capacity? And then when do you make that flip?
The the first thing the first thing I would say is the one document you should definitely have is power of attorney.
And when
And
does that
there's just
happen?
your
Like, when is the right time for that?
I had power of attorney for my mother really pretty well before I was really having to deal with, caregiving and moving her or any of that. My father died young, like 66, and my sister passed away years ago, so it was pretty much me. And at some point, my mother decided you should be, signatory on my bank account in case anything happens. You should be able to sign for anything, make decisions in case anything happens to me. So my mother very willingly gave me power of attorney. I mean, we did that process. We did a very last minute scurry to create a durable, that's called a durable power of attorney healthcare when she was in rehab because we really were very unhappy with the rehab facility and we wanted to move her to a different one, which is a whole long story that I won't get into here. But in order to do that and work with her insurance and all of that, I really had to have that healthcare authority. So we brought a notary, a traveling notary, to the rehab facility where she was and did that durable power of attorney so we would have it. And thank God we did it when we did because then she ended up we moved her and then she was in and out of the hospital and it was a good thing to have that. Sometimes when your parent lands in the hospital unexpectedly, the first thing they ask you is, "Do you have a durable power of attorney for healthcare?" And if not, here, we can help you with that. And they have it, available in hospitals for you to create. So
But do
you
you have
don't
to have that? Do you have to have them with full mental capacity to get that done, though? I would
You would have to,
think you
otherwise
would.
they wouldn't be able to sign.
Right. So then I'm
yeah, I
wondering,
think they
like,
do. I think right. You want to do it when they have the mental capacity to give you that authority.
so even maybe before
Unless
handling their money and stuff, get that one first, the medical one, just in case something happens.
yeah, I think so because it's simple. There's another document that I want to mention. It's called a POLST, POLST in California. I think it stands for Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. That's literally the DNR, the do not resuscitate. That is
Mhm.
where you declare, I want you to take extraordinary measures. I don't want you to take extraordinary measures. And my mother's physician, because she went to a physician who, specialized in geriatric patients. And the physician had her fill it out. And I remember sitting in the appointment with her and the doctor saying, "Do you want this? Do you want this? Do you want this?" And my mother was very adamant about she didn't want to be on life support. She didn't want life sustaining treatment. If she stops breathing, that's it. I don't want, to be resuscitated. I don't want CPR. So it was her decision, which made it very easy for me actually, because I don't know that I would have been able to make that decision. I would have been more, no, do whatever, do
Yeah.
whatever you can. So the pulse in some states, it's called a most or a most, like medical orders for life sustaining treatment. So it's got different names, but it's basically any primary care doctor of an elderly patient should have that in their file. So that should just
Okay.
exist.
Okay.
And
So
then
that is
the power of attorney.
power of attorney, and then a full power of attorney, which then starts doing financial
Exactly.
management and stuff like that. So I could imagine it
Right.
you kind of phase them in a little bit because I also knowing elderly, I mean, one, they want their independence, so they're going to
Right.
want to hold on to those responsibilities as much as possible. There's a trust,
Right.
possibly. You never know, like, especially if there are diminished mental capacity with dementia or Alzheimer's, they start, questioning things and they lose trust and start accusing. So I think
Right.
that's a big concern.
And just a reminder to everyone, if possible, have a trust and a will set up if you have any kind of dependence at all, even not when you're elderly, right? I mean, it's better to have all
Exactly.
that
That was
stuff
the
in
other thing.
place.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to say. The documents that we talk about in the chapter that's about finance and legal, we talk about wills and trusts and powers of attorney. Those are kind of
Okay.
the big deal documents. And I also would, again, everything costs money, but I definitely recommend, if necessary or possible, to get an elder care lawyer, get just a lawyer who
Mhm.
specializes in that, who can help with the documents. I mean, you can do it all on your own. You can use, I forget what it's called. Oh
Like
my gosh, I've
Legal
used it
Zoom or
so.
something?
LegalZoom, that's what I was
Mhm.
gonna say. We've used LegalZoom for things. If you need to do it yourself and not pay a lot, you can still get legal support through LegalZoom, but definitely, get professional legal help with this stuff. And a will or a trust definitely makes things much easier.
Yeah. Speaking of the financial side, I know we're running out of time, but are there any, like, financial realities that catch families off guard that you can speak to other than,
The,
your
the,
situation with your mom? Like maybe they can't afford full assisted living. Are there other financial things that we need to be thinking about now?
I think one of the things to think about is, people are living much longer than they used to. And there's a really good chance that our parents are going to outlive their money. So just be aware they may outlive their money. The second thing, this is kind of a secret, and politically, I don't know what's going to happen with this, but there is money available through programs like Medicaid for people, even if they own a home. It isn't necessarily that you have to be at poverty level to qualify. Every state is different because it's run by the state. So some states, if you make more than $24,000 a year, forget it, you're never going to get any help. Other states, California, the bar is much, much higher. So you might plan in advance and start thinking for the fact that you may be able to get financial assistance for your parents. But I think the thing is that the cost of care could exceed their ability to pay. Assisted living price just goes up and up and up. We talk a lot about long-term care insurance, which if you don't buy it really before you're 50, then it becomes really hard to get. But long-term care insurance is always going to be capped at what it will cover. So at the end of the day, you or your parent are probably going to be paying a lot of things out of pocket. And you just have to expect that that's going to happen and plan for it if you start far enough in advance. If you have a 20-minute sort of runway to plan, a 20-year runway, then you could start getting your ducks in a row.
Yeah. And then there's the whole thing. Okay, so with that, then you've got siblings who should share in the responsibilities. Is there anything in your
Right.
book where you talk about like how to recommend families divide responsibilities or, avoid sibling
It's
conflict
interesting.
or
We
anything
talk
like
about
that?
that. Yeah, we talk about that a little bit. We talk about the importance of communication and siblings providing assistance based on what they're able to do. Like a lot of circumstances, one sibling lives in the same state or city as the parent and the other sibling doesn't. So obviously, the sibling who's near the parent is going to be physically doing more. And in those cases, maybe the sibling who's further away is helping foot the bill more financially, or however you divide it up. But it's interesting that you would ask that question because we've had lots of conversations since we wrote the book with people who read the book and they bring up the topic of siblings. That seems to be the most common topic people bring up. One is, well, what do you do when one sibling won't let the other siblings do anything, insists on doing it all and making all the decisions? Versus, what happens when one sibling lives closer, or what happens when one sibling doesn't think mom and dad need care? So we actually started blogging. Since we published the book, we started a blog that we've been doing weekly. We've written 2 blogs already on siblings and sibling rivalry. We're on Substack. And there are situations where, one sibling insists on making all the decisions at the risk of jeopardizing their relationship with their siblings, but also potentially jeopardizing their own health because they're doing everything and they won't take any assistance. But
Yeah,
you
sibling
also get
dynamics are hard.
they are. And I have a friend who told me a story about she sent a book to her brother, the book is called Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant? And it's a New York Times bestseller. It's very, very funny. It's a cartoon book. And she said, "Oh, this is so funny. I'm going to send this to my brother as a little hint, mom and dad, we need to be thinking about it." And her thinking it was very clever. And the response she got from her brother was, "Mom and dad don't need any help." And meanwhile, she was already doing a lot to take care of her parents.
Yeah.
So you get every scenario in the book. And I just think the best thing to do is have, crucial conversations that we all learn about business, but have those conversations. Talk about your parent, their end of life care, their living situation, divide up the responsibilities, sort of divide and conquer. If everyone lives close, great. If not, you make it geography based.
Yeah.
Right. It sounds like communication comes in for that very importantly.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important part.
Right. Where would we find your blog if someone wanted to find that?
We're on Substack under the name Caring for Aging Parents with the number 4 instead of the word for spelled out.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's also our website for our book website is caringforagingparents.com. So we do have the blog on the website, but I admit the site was built in a tool that I don't know as well as others. So I'm not as current in getting the new blogs to the website as I could be. So I'd say check out Substack. You can subscribe for free or subscribe for not free. And we're posting weekly.
Oh,
And there's a
great.
couple
And
blogs right now on siblings. And we also talk about when that moment comes when you find out it's time to care for your parent. So a lot of the topics that are in our book they're since we wrote the book, you know, kind of afterthoughts, things that are coming up now as we talk to people about the book.
Well, it's constant learning, I can imagine, and just
so much information.
yeah, and things changing. So this all is, shows us how much responsibility we have. We are that sandwich generation. We're taking care of a lot, our careers, our kids, grandkids, our parents. To end
Right.
on a bit of a positive note, I guess, to
Sure.
over all the responsibilities we're having to take on, is there an unexpected gift or meaningful moment that came from your caregiving journey that you want to share?
Oh gosh. There were a few. I mean, it in hindsight, there were a lot of times I know I was really cranky, you know, because I would go to see my mother at the nursing home or the assisted living was, "Hang this up, put this over here, bring me this," and I'd be like, "Okay." And I'd get really cranky, and in hindsight, you know, I I wish I'd been a little calmer. But at the same time, I think I was spending a lot of time and toward the end of my mother's life, when she was in and out of the hospital, and her brother, my uncle, who's 93 and still doing fantastic without any assistance, but he had driven down from San Francisco to spend Thanksgiving with us. We didn't know my mother would end up in the hospital. So we got her Thanksgiving dinner, took her to the hospital. And one of the things she did was she said to my uncle, "They take such good care of me." And that was, I mean, it was kind of gut-wrenching. It's that I think I'm being a horrible daughter and I'm being mean you know, and in fact, from my mother's perspective, we were taking such good care of her. So that was probably the most touching moment, but there were quite a few really entertaining moments. My mother managed to keep her sense of humor through everything, and one of the funniest stories, and this is in the book, but she was in this rehab facility that we didn't think much of, and she had just gotten over COVID and had been, so confined to a bed that she wasn't walking on her own. She couldn't do much of anything, so she really needed to ask for assistance with everything, and the care was not very good. And at one point, the caregiver came in and my mother and said, "Do you need anything?" My mother said, "Yes, could you please help me brush my teeth?" And the caregiver said, "Where are they?" And my mother said, "In my mouth." So
That's funny.
Yeah,
So I
that is
came to
funny.
visit her. She told the story. She's telling the story. Tears are coming down her face because she's laughing so hard. And I was laughing so hard just picturing it because the assumption is she's got her dentures sitting in a cup somewhere. But so there were moments like that, the stories, the humor when she would call me up and say they just tried to give me the meds for the patient in the next bed. And my
Oh,
mother
that's
was sharp
scary.
enough to say, "I don't take that."
Yeah.
Yeah, and that happens a lot. That happens a lot, unfortunately, in the medical field, so you have to monitor that as
Yikes.
well.
Yeah. Wow. So, Kim, where can folks get your book, Survival Guide to Caring for Aging Parents?
So we're online only. We're on Amazon. I know a lot of people don't like to shop on Amazon. We are also on Barnes& and Noble online, bn.com.
Oh, nice.
And
Yeah,
then
I saw it on Amazon.
Yeah. And you can get
yeah, it's on
Kindle or
Amazon.
hard copy.
We have hard copy, we have paperback, and we also have Kindle.
Okay. Nice.
And if you have Kindle Unlimited, I think it's free to Kindle Unlimited members. And then
Great.
otherwise, it's for sale for $4.99, the digital version on Amazon. We'll probably at some point in the not too distant future run a 24 or 48-hour promotion where it's maybe 99 cents or free for those 24 hours for Kindle.
Hmm.
So it's pretty easy to get a Kindle version of the book.
Okay. Well,
Uh,
great. Well, I'm looking forward. I started it and then I went on
Great.
my vacation with my grandkids and I didn't have as much time to read as my other vacations that I usually take. So, but I'm forward to finishing it. And because I know it's
Great.
coming up, I mean, the experiences that I had with my mother in law, even though I wasn't the primary caregiver, I've learned a lot, but I realize I don't know a lot. And so it's going to be so important for me as I start thinking about my own parents and where they are in their life journeys.
Right. And I would love, stay in touch. Let us know if you think there's anything that we missed that isn't in the book. Because, I mean, that's really why we started the blog. It's like, oh, wow, we need to talk more about siblings. We need to talk more about dementia and Alzheimer's.
Yeah,
We
we'll definitely
touch on
check
it in the
back.
book, but yeah. Yeah. So just let us know if there's anything you think you'd like to hear more of because we're gonna keep talking about it and writing about it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been very informative. We're all kind of facing the same challenges, so it's nice to at least get started on becoming somewhat prepared. Like you said, there can never be totally prepared, but better to be at least
Right.
somewhat prepared.
Yeah, and we'll put
And good
everything on
luck.
our website. We'll put the links to the book, the blog, and then
Great.
I liked your mention about that funny book. Can't we talk about something more pleasant? So,
Oh, it's very I bought it for myself after my friend told me the story. It's funny. It's like a cartoon book. It looks like, a
okay,
kid book. It's all cartoons. It's this woman's story about caring for her parents in New York, and it's very and I only just started it, but
yeah,
it's very entertaining.
great.
Nice.
Well, thank you, Kim. I
Thanks
so much
again.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Have a good night.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to the podcast so we can continue to grow our community. And follow us on Instagram at Working Grandmas Podcast, on Facebook
at The Grand Balance, a Working Grandmas podcast, and join our LinkedIn group, Working Grandmas. You can also email us at info@workinggrandmas.com or message us through any of our social media platforms.